Dear Vladimir Putin, I wish I was your father. I wish when you were younger, I could have been able to show you how to make pies, apple crisp. Could have shown you all these different ways to bake a cake. There is no one way to bake a pie. Mr. Putin, Vladimir, I wish I was your father so that I could teach you how to be a man. Well, as much of a man as I am. Mr. Putin, if I was your father, I would call you Luke and recite the Star Wars line. Luke, I'm your father. Mr. Putin, I wish I was your father because I need another season of 90210. And Mr. Putin, the reason why I'm making this video is because our cultural systems are falling apart. Welcome into the podcast. That was a very poor open in reference to a video that was put out by, I don't even know what the actress's name is, but she's an actress on 90210, which I think is about Los Angeles or something like that. It's been on the airwaves for a number of years, and it was a video of this woman. She made a video speaking about, if I was your mother, Vladimir Putin, you would have been loved. You wouldn't, none of this would have happened. You would have been a great guy. If only I was your mother. And obviously was a very bad video. And it's one of those things where there's a very bad situation going on in Eastern Europe right now, right next to Russia. And people want to chime in. People want to give their thoughts, their opinions on what's going on, trying to make sense of it all, and trying to see where this could potentially lead to. Could this lead to a world war? Could this lead to just a giant country as Russia in terms of size? Could they ultimately take back something which they believe is theirs? They believe that Ukraine should be a part of Russia? Or is this just idiotic celebrity pushing out nonsense? I would say that's what that video was. And if you haven't seen it, look it up. I don't know the actress's name or anything like that, but it was an interesting thing to watch, to say the least. But I'm not going to start my show off with Ukraine. I'm going to speak about my thoughts at the end of this episode, kind of as was supposed to and planning on recording a couple of days ago. I'm recording this at around noon on Saturday, March 5th. And I had an opportunity to record on Wednesday, but I wanted to go through as much as I could about the whole situation that's going on currently between Russia and Ukraine. And so at the end of this episode, I will speak about that. And I apologize for the delay in my episode. Frankly, it was a mixture of wanting to have a formal, actual opinion on a certain multitude of stuff, but then also there's stuff happening in the sports world as well. You have the NFL Combine going on right now. You have the Aaron Rodgers debacle that's been going on, which I really want to talk about. And on top of that, you have just some life stuff that I wanted to talk about as well. So I'm not sure how long this podcast is going to be, so make sure you buckle up and let's enjoy the ride. So here is how to how to start this off. Currently in the NFL Combine is usually a time where usually a bunch of coaches, GMs, front office members of NFL teams gather and go down to wherever the combine is happening to see the potential draft picks that they might be choosing. They might interview some certain players. I know the Steelers are looking for a quarterback, so for example, they're interviewing and posting on their social medias who they are interviewing and stuff like that, which I think is good. It's transparent and open. Um, and I think that the combine is a really good time for a lot of information to come out. And so now we have one of the people that I follow is Ian Rappaport. I have his Twitter notifications turned on, so anytime he tweets something, I'll just take a glance at it and then maybe put in the back of my mind to think about later. So I mean, just first right off the bat, just some stuff. I'm just going down his Twitter, and this was 18 hours ago from when I'm recording this. Sources say that the Washington Commanders, they just changed their name, made a strong offer to the Seahawks on Russell Wilson. It didn't go anywhere, but it is a sign Washington is ready to deal. And given what they have on their roster, they may be a QB away. A little bit of editorializing there from Mr. Rappaport, but I think if you are a team who's in the NFL, especially an NFC team, it's very tightly contested over there. There's a lot of good teams at the top. We just had the Rams win the Super Bowl, and then next year, I don't think their path is going to be as easy. I mean, you had a lot of teams who in the playoffs really struggled, and you had the 49ers make it to the NFC Championship, which I did not see happening. And as a result, the Rams were able to win the Super Bowl. They won fair and square. They beat the Bengals. Bengals was a team I did not see making it to the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year, nor did I see it when they first got into the playoffs. I thought it was going to be Chiefs, Rams. That was kind of my pick before the season. Chiefs, Rams, possibly Bills, Rams. But I thought coming out of the NFC, the Rams, you just looked at their roster. They finally got the quarterback. Before that, they were always competitive. They had made a Super Bowl with Jared Goff, and now you see Jared Goff go to Detroit, and you see how he's performed over there. And it made me realize how important it is to have a good quarterback. And a lot of times it's not just about on the field, because you're only on the field on Sundays or Thursdays or Mondays for 4 hours. And I feel as though sometimes people think of football as just what they do on the field. Obviously, that's the most important. That's what all your time and preparation goes into. But I think a lot of people forget about what these, especially quarterbacks, but all players, are behind the scenes when they're practicing. How much time are they putting into film? How much conversations and conversations that there are with other members of the front office, coaching staff, all that kind of stuff. How much are these players doing off the field? I mean, you're getting paid millions of dollars. You're probably getting a bunch of people all over the place asking you to be in commercials, sponsorship deals, local businesses asking you to do meet and greets, charity events, all that kind of stuff. And then you have practice, then you have film study, you have all of this stuff that you have to do. And I think it is super important for a quarterback to be primarily focused on football. And I think not only do you have to be uber talented on the field, but off the field, you have to be uberly dedicated. I mean, the best example of that is Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, guys who have legendary stories about the amount of preparation that they put in, where they can see how a defense lines up, and then they can either change the play at the line of scrimmage without the coach's input or anything like that. It's just them. And at that point in time, they make the decision to, okay, we're going to switch to a run. We're going to switch to a play action pass and throw a bomb down the field, depending on what the defense is showing. And I think that the Rams pretty much was an indication of that. And I think it's an indication that there are teams in the NFL in which they do feel like they are a quarterback away, where they do feel like if they just get the quarterback right, they'll at least be able to make the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game or two. And I think Washington is one of those teams. I think that they should probably try and make an aggressive offer at Russell Wilson. Now, if that means you have to part ways with a young player, I don't know if I would give up Chase Young. I mean, one of the strengths, probably the strength of that team is their defensive line. And you take Chase Young off that defensive line, and I think that kind of breaks up the unit because you have some other players. Matthew Ioannidis is another one that comes to mind of players that are not super young, not like a Chase Young, or on the other side, Montez Sweat. You have these players that are super young, super athletic, super fast. And I think that you need to have a good defensive line if you are Washington, because the rest of their defense is all right. They do have some good pieces there, but their pride and joy is their defensive line. And then on the offensive side, they have to figure out the running back offensive line. But Terry McLaurin as a wide receiver is very solid, very solid. And if you plug in Russell Wilson there, I think there is a possibility for them to make it to the playoffs. I mean, let's look at the divisions for where they're going to be. I mean, because you have to think they have to be able to beat everybody in their division. And I mean, it's hard to do that. So looking at kind of what their thoughts are, let's see right here. Let me pull it up. All right. NFC East. This is last year. Cowboys, Eagles, Washington, Giants. Washington went 7-10 last year, completely underperformed. People thought that their defense would be one of the best in the league. And I didn't watch too many of their games, but when I did watch them, their defense kind of felt like what it was thought of before the season compared to during the season was completely different. I thought this defensive line would be the best that we had seen in years. They had so much talent on that defense, and it just didn't happen. And I think going forward in the NFC East, you add Russell Wilson to that division. It's going to be interesting. I don't think the Cowboys go 12-5 next year. There's talks currently of them possibly releasing Amari Cooper. I believe in my mind he is not way overpaid, but I think overpaid. He is getting considerably top of the line money for a wide receiver who, frankly, when I see his value on that team, I think that money could be better invested on the defense. You already have Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's still on his rookie deal. Michael Gallup, you'll be able to re-sign him, but it won't be for an Amari Cooper type contract. I think you can get him for considerably less. And I think mostly for the Cowboys, you gotta work on that defense. I mean, the linebackers, defensive line, very worrisome. And then also the pass defense as an entire unit. Yeah, they had some standouts there. They had the league leader in interceptions that you do have still on your team. But I don't know if you'll be able to recreate that season next year. But still, they allowed a bunch of passing yards. And I think that's a real weakness for them. And maybe if they trade Amari Cooper to another team before releasing him, or instead of, I should say, maybe they are able to get something in return. I don't know if they really need another wide receiver, Maybe they need some kind of defensive player. I don't know if they need a defensive lineman, maybe a linebacker or a safety of some sort. But I think that's a very interesting position where next year going in, I'm not too sure who's going to win that division because you look at the Eagles. Yeah, Jalen Hurts played very well last year, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he has the right mentality when it comes to things. He came out of Alabama and then went over to Oklahoma. I feel like he's one of the best in terms of his personality that I've seen from a quarterback perspective. I mean, he acts like a grown-up man. He even did that in college. And I think he'll be able to have some success with the Eagles, but it's just a matter of them being able to surround him with a good defense. Because I think in most cases, if you have a good quarterback, you gotta have a good defense. And I would imagine if Washington is able to get Russell Wilson, they'll be able to make it to the playoffs. I think they could be a 10-win team with Russell Wilson. And if there's no significant injuries, and if they trade for him, they don't give up a huge piece like Chase Young. I would prefer them to give up draft picks. Probably have to do maybe 2, 3 first round picks. But I think looking at what the Rams did, I think they're pretty happy that they gave up those picks and are now winning a Super Bowl. With that being said, I kind of wanted to move on. And I just want to see. Let me scroll up a little bit. Here we go. 15 hours ago, with all eyes on Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers and his future, here is the latest. Sources say Rodgers is truly torn on where he wants to play in 2022. While many in the NFL expect him to return, there's lots of positivity in Green Bay. He's going back and forth on what he wants. Here's the thing about this entire Aaron Rodgers situation. I ultimately, to start right off the bat, I ultimately think he stays in Green Bay. I think he stays there. And because I really don't know what kind of trade package another team is going to try and put together. I mean, you have to look at what you could possibly get in return. I mean, there's this story on Pro Football Talk about possibility of teams that have been talked about. Here's the quote. The destinations are believed to be exclusively in the AFC. To little surprise, the Broncos are one of them. Other viable possibilities are the Titans and Steelers. Now, there has been talk from the Titans where they say, we're really not interested in Aaron Rodgers because they're happy with Ryan Tannehill. And I can understand that. I feel like you'd be giving up a lot to make it would be a difference. Aaron Rodgers is definitely a better football player than Ryan Tannehill at this point in time. But in terms of the amount of money, in terms of having somebody who's been in pretty much the same system, specifically the same geographical area for the entirety of his career, I don't know what Aaron Rodgers would do if he's not in a Packers uniform. I really don't know how he would make that switch and that change. Obviously, we saw Tom Brady make the change from being 20 years with Bill Belichick in that system to the Buccaneers in a completely different system. And he flourished that first year. And even the second year, statistically, he was phenomenal. But I do worry that you bring Aaron Rodgers into the Titans They are at that level where they're just a little bit away from possibly making a run in the playoffs. I mean, they were first in the division last year, or first in the conference, I should say, first in the AFC. And they weren't able to do all too much in the playoffs. They were beat by the Bengals. And I feel as though time for them is pretty close. And I do feel like, as I said earlier, they are kind of a step away. But I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to the Titans. I don't see that whatsoever. But I do see. I think the number one has to be the Broncos, followed by the Steelers. I mean, the Broncos for years and years. John Elway, Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He's pretty much running the show over there. And he is obviously a worldwide known quarterback, great quarterback. And he just hasn't seemed to be able to get the quarterback position really figured out all that well. And you did have Peyton Manning, who had the opportunity to have a lot of success. I mean, you look at that defense with Von Miller. I mean, on offense, Demaryius Thomas. Just a fantastic team surrounding Peyton Manning. And I think he performed up to expectations. I mean, he was old when he went over there, and he was very injury ridden, but he was still able to, up until his last couple of years before he retired, he was a very good quarterback. Very good, very productive. And I feel as though that there could be a similar situation where Denver Broncos are saying, we have an opportunity now. We have a young team. We want to take that next step. Aaron Rodgers, I could see him retiring in 3 years, 2 to 3 years. I think he has 2 to 3. I would not bet that he stays another 4 years in the NFL. But I could see 3 years. I definitely could see 2 years. I don't think he's going to retire at the end of next season. I just don't see it. Now, if does he sign another contract? Not sure. That makes him an NFL player for much longer. But I think that Aaron Rodgers could possibly go to the Broncos. And I think they would need him. And I think the Broncos, yeah, they are in a pretty tough division. The Chiefs are in that division. So that'll be interesting to see if they'll want to pull the trigger on that. I don't know if that's the best option for Rodgers. Frankly, I think his best option is to stay in Green Bay. Yeah, maybe he could try and go to another team, but I think at this late in his career, I don't know if he wants to make that change. I feel like he has such respect and support in the organization that he really just can have his thoughts be known, and he has a lot of trust and respect for the people that are in that building. He knows everyone, and I'm sure he knows people on other teams as well, but in most cases, I would say he doesn't really need to leave. I don't think if Aaron Rodgers goes to another team that he'll win a Super Bowl. It doesn't matter what team he goes to. I do not see Aaron Rodgers winning another Super Bowl in his career. And I think that's the reality of, as a Hall of Famer, statistically, you can make the case that he is the greatest quarterback of all time. I mean, just from a talent and a skills perspective, you could make that argument. I would disagree, but I could see the argument and I can respect that point of view. But I think Aaron Rodgers is going to stay. And I think that the Steelers would make an offer, and that'd be awesome if he came here to Pittsburgh. I would definitely go watch him. but I just don't think that the Steelers or the Broncos are going to be able to pull anything out that would entice the Packers. I mean, if you're the Packers and you're trying to trade Aaron Rodgers, what is it going to be? Is it going to be? I mean, it's contingent on how long is he going to play? Is he going to retire in 2 years? If you're going to put everything on the line, just to maybe get to a conference championship game. I mean, maybe he's able to do that, but I frankly just believe that Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay. They resign. Maybe they let some people go to help out with the cap situation. But I think he does stay because, frankly, I don't see the value of him going to another team. Broncos are not ready to win a Super Bowl. They're not ready to even reach the Super Bowl. And on the Steelers, no, they have a very good defense, but I don't see them being able to frankly, with Aaron Rodgers on that team, I don't think they win the division next year. I think the Ravens will most likely win that next year. And then it'll be right after that, Bengals, Steelers. Joey Beans just made it to the Super Bowl. I don't think he does it again. Frankly, I don't know if Joe Burrow is ever going to reach the Super Bowl again. But I think he's going to be able to have a lot of success for the time moving on. But I don't see Aaron Rodgers moving anywhere. And frankly, if he does move somewhere, I'd be frankly surprised. And then also speaking about Aaron Rodgers, there was yeah, let me just say it first and then I'll speak it. Diana Rossini of ESPN talked about Aaron Rodgers' wishes on the Rich Eisen show. Quote, from the conversations I've had with a lot of people in the league, he wants to be the highest paid player in the NFL by a wide margin. We are talking about $50 million a year. That is what I was told. I was told that is around the number he's looking for per year. So there's a lot to break down here. First, I would say, does he deserve $50 million a year? I think a team would pay him for that. I don't think he's worth that. I would probably, my upper limit for him would be about 40. But I think there would be teams that are willing to dish out that type of money for him. But we're talking about a quarterback who is definitely going to retire. He's not going to sign a 5-year deal and play out that entirety of the 5 years. And if he is going to play another 5 years, those last 2 or 3, I feel are just going to be awful. And you're looking at maybe they structure it so the last year of his contract, it's a $20-30 million cap hit. But if you're looking years down the road, I don't see Aaron Rodgers as being able to last that much longer. But here's the second piece about this is I want to go back again. From the conversations I've had with a lot of people in the league, what does that mean? What is conversations I've had with a lot of people in the league? There's a thing that when I first started listening to sports talk radio and watching TV shows on sports networks, FS1, ESPN, all that kind of stuff, where they would talk about an anonymous source said something would happen, or somebody close to the situation, or somebody with insider knowledge said something. And at that point, I took it as gospel. because there is reality of anonymous sources, and I learned while I was in college about the importance of having sources and keeping their identities hidden for their own safety, because there could be repercussions of that person if they have their name attached to a statement. And I can understand the perspective. And if I was in that situation, I'd probably want to do the same thing to save my own butt, selfishly. But when it comes to these sources, there has to be an open and honest discussion about, instead of taking everything that's said as gospel, questioning it. I mean, you see this with a bunch of stuff that's going on in the rest of the world right now. Somebody says something to you, that does not mean that what they are telling you is 100% of the truth. Maybe Aaron Rodgers asked for $50 million. Okay. And if I didn't look into this story whatsoever, I would have said, man, $50 million a year. I don't think he's worth that much. What the heck is going on? And then you watch TV shows where these people are saying, former teammates, oh, he's selfish. He told me never talk about money, and now he wants to talk about money. What are you doing, dude? And I can understand the frustration behind that. But Aaron Rodgers, and I watched this on the Pat McAfee show. Pat McAfee said that he texted Aaron Rodgers. He sent Aaron Rodgers a text saying, hey, are you asking for $50 million a year? And according to Pat McAfee, yeah. Aaron Rodgers texted him back and said, no, I am not looking for $50 million a year. It's, here we go. Calling the claims, quote, categorically false. And then Pat McAfee went on to later speak his mind about these league sources or people close to the situation or people with insider knowledge, people who are in the building or something. Sometimes these reports are not always true, and it's hard to say. It's good to call out BS when there is BS. And Aaron Rodgers, with him coming out and say, yo, I don't want $50 million. It's not what I asked for. I mean, if you're gonna give me 50 million, I'll take it. But I just, maybe Aaron Rodgers did, and he's lying to Pat McAfee, or maybe he told Pat McAfee, yeah, I did it, and then Pat McAfee lied to cover his friend's butt. I don't see that. I think it's more the case of somebody told Diana Rossini, hey, he's asking for 50 million. Like, this guy's crazy. I mean, that's what I've been hearing. And maybe it's somebody from the Broncos or the Steelers or the Titans. Like, he wants $50 million. He wants a bunch of money, man. Like, that guy's crazy. And so, yeah, he's gonna have to leave the Packers, because he's not gonna be able to get that type of money with them. But with us, we have cap space. We have cap space. I think, yeah, this is an example of how the media kind of works. I mean, the sports media, the political media, all these different kinds of people. They talk about what they're being told, and I don't fault them at all. If you're told that Aaron Rodgers wants $50 million a year, you're going to go with that story. And I mean, another example of this is Adam Schefter and multiple other NFL reporters tweeting and talking about Tom Brady's retirement before Tom Brady announced his retirement. And I just think that's a crappy thing to do. But that's my opinion, but I can see it from their perspective, where their job is to report stuff that they're being told. If they're being told by somebody that Tom Brady is going to retire and they believe that person, kind of like with this Aaron Rodgers story. If you're being told that in both situations, yeah, I know this guy and I think he's going to do X, well, then you're going to do your job and say, uh, it's being, I'm being told by people in the know that Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady is going to do X. And so I don't fault them for coming out and talking about that stuff that they're hearing. It's just something I wouldn't do. I think when it comes to retirement, specifically with Tom Brady, let the guy make his own announcement. You don't have to make that announcement. Tom Brady, I think we all knew he was going to retire on his own terms, and he wanted to be the one to put it out. And feel like there was a bunch of steam that was taken out of his sails, or wind out of his sail, whatever the saying is. But it was unfortunate that before Tom Brady could announce the retirement, it was already reported that he was going to retire. And so it made the retirement that much more. I mean, it was eventful, but it didn't have that same oomph that it would have had if there was no report about Tom Brady retiring. There were rumors, but there is no Sports Center bright red breaking news headline that said Tom Brady plans to retire. And I think that's the kind of same thing with the Aaron Rodgers case, where it's you get told something by somebody who says they're in the know. Maybe the person who told Diana Rossini this information was in the Packers organization. Maybe they were an equipment manager. Maybe they were a general manager. I don't know. But Aaron Rodgers texting Pat McAfee and saying, "No, this is false. I'm not asking $50 million a year. I still haven't made a decision." Now this was a little while back, but maybe he's changed his mind now. As I was talking about earlier, he there are some options for him. Some other teams are looking for that quarterback to take him to the next level. And so I just think that with the Aaron Rodgers situation, it's pretty interesting. Like I said, I don't think he's gonna move. I don't see him doing really anything. I see him staying in Green Bay, and I see him continuing his career there, and most likely maybe he ends his career at another location, but like his last year or something like that, where he's like, okay, I got one last shot. I want to go to a different team. But as of right now, I don't think he's going to be moving anywhere. And I think it's unfortunate about the reports that are being talked about. And speaking of things that are being talked about, kind of in my own mind, I read a book recently, and it's one. Books are fascinating, because growing up in school, I had no desire to read. My father would read to me while I was in bed. He would read me these stories, Magic Treehouse, things of that nature. And I love doing that because it's different from a movie. Oh, and it's different from reading the book, because you have somebody else reading it to you, and all of the attention is put on imagining what the words are in your mind. So you're creating this whole world, and you can see everything. You can put yourself in that location and see everything that's in that world that's being told and illustrated by the author. And you have the added advantage of, you don't have to look at the words and outright see the words, and then also at the same time think about what they mean. No, you just have to listen and then you can imagine. So there's just less effort. And I frankly think that the latest book that I read, Animal Farm, is one of the most fascinating and one of the best books I've ever read. And the reason why I did read it is because I think currently, right now, there is a lot of real world use to it. And the next book I'm gonna read is 1984. Both of the Animal Farm and 1984 are written by George Orwell and written in the 1940s, 1950s, long time ago. But their messages and their warnings are still relevant to today. And before reading Animal Farm, I had heard about people talking about it, kind of like it's a criticism of like a bunch of modern day ideas and thoughts. And as I was reading it, I thought it was fascinating. You have this story of animals that are on a farm and they don't like how the way that things are happening. You have people, they get to this certain age where they're no longer of use to the farmer and they're killed, and then they're being used, their remains are used for food, clothing, whatever it may be. But there's this old pig that kind of says, listen, we need to have an uprising and then recreate the farm in our image so it serves us, because we're the people that are doing the work. The farmers are not doing anything. The farmers just tell us what to do. And so they stage this uprising, overtake the farm, and then they reinstate their own system, of which they talk about how all animals are equal. And it really is a fascinating tale of the beginning of a society of where things are equal. And then, but within that equality, there's these notes and letters that are written and put on a wall, and it says all animals are created equal. And a constant phrase: 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. 4 legs being all the animals, the pigs, the horses, the sheep, whatever it may be. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And it starts off like that, and then slowly over the course of the book, you see kind of this hierarchy form, and it's not formed by specific people's interests or purpose or skills. This hierarchy is formed by intelligence, and the smartest animals on the farm happen to be the pigs. And the pigs understand reading and writing. They understand literature. They have a more full knowledge of what goes on at the farm. And so they become leaders early on. And there's 2 leaders at the time. And these 2 pigs, they don't agree on anything. And it's really interesting to kind of see how they go back and forth with each other. One person says one thing, the other says, no, they're wrong. Here's why you need to do this. And after this has happened for a while, one pig all of a sudden is having a conversation. He's having a big speech. And then the other pig tries to speak, and these dogs come out of nowhere and chase that other pig away. After that, the pig, who was not chased away, comes in power, and he says, listen, we're going to recreate our society because we can't have anybody who doesn't go along with what we all want. And by we, he means what he wants. And so what begins happening after that is history is rewritten. So earlier in the book, there's a fight in which all the farmers who had previously owned, or the farmer who had previously owned the farm, he got kicked out. And then later on, he comes back with other people to try and reclaim the farm again. And all the animals have this really great plan, and they start fighting, and they eventually defeat the farmers that come in. And as the fight breaks out, there's members of it that are hurt, members of it that are eventually succumb to their injuries as well. And one of those people is the pig that was chased out by the dogs and attacked. So now with the new leader installed, he starts speaking about the previous one. He says, in the battle, he was never a fighter. He didn't do anything. He was actually very fearful, and he actually fought for the humans. He actually fought against them. And then the people are saying to themselves, and some of them even say this to the pig. They say, I thought he was fighting with us. He got shot. He got injured, and he kept fighting for us. And then the pig goes, no, you're remembering it wrong. No, that's not what happened. No, you're remembering it wrong. That didn't happen. And these people are like, I thought it was. And he's, no, you're just mistaken. And when that happened in the story, I was like, oh, I know what that is. And that was the first moment in time where I was able to understand what gaslighting is. Because before that, I always heard people talking about, you're gaslighting me. Stop gaslighting me. And I had no idea what the heck they were talking about. Quite frankly, I didn't know really what the definition was. I would look at the definition and I was like, this doesn't make sense. But in this instance, where you have these people that were there, saw this person fight valiantly, if that's even a word, and then after the fact, received a medal to later on be being told that, no, he actually didn't fight for us. And he actually fought against us. And he was injured because he wanted to trick us. And we should have never given that award. And actually, the award that you're thinking of is actually not the award that we gave him. And you have these other people who, once again, not as intelligent as the pigs are. And so they're like, all right, well, the pigs know best. And then the story just kind of continues with the more and more people try and speak out, the more that they are chastised, and ultimately some of them removed, some of them even executed for coming out against. And so they try and build a windmill to help create their own supplies, so they're self-sufficient and they don't have to rely on other people. Because one of the other things that they said was, don't do any business with humans. Don't touch any money. Don't do anything like that. You don't want to be as far removed from human as possible. But they start losing animals. They start not being able to produce as much crops, and they have real issues. And so one of the things that they do is they reach out to another farm, and the animals are like, I thought we were supposed to be self-sufficient. I didn't think we were supposed to reach out to other people. And then over the course of the book, they're like, yeah, but it's for the windmill. We need the windmill. We need the windmill. You guys have to break your backs while the pigs all get to sleep in the person's house. One thing that they said early on not to do. They said, don't do anything with the house. You can't sleep in a bed. You can't wear human clothes. You have to be as animal as possible. But throughout the story, you see this humanification of the pigs where they slowly creep, not just literally creep into the house, but creep into the beds, creep into the former clothes, the leather pants, the glasses. And then slowly from there, while everybody else is working and building these windmills, harvesting crops, doing all these things to, yes, help everybody out, but not everybody's helping out. And you have the pigs slowly over the course of the book become super, I don't know. Yeah, they become super obese, become super drunkards. They find out how to make beer and alcohol. And so they have fields of barley, I believe it's barley, that are planted, and they have people take it for them, and they have their beers and they are drinking and they are partying. And towards the end of the book, there's a scene in which the pigs are at their fattest. Pigs are super fat. They've pretty much abandoned all morals. Remember earlier how I was talking about there were those rules that were written on the wall. And once again, not a lot of the animals can read. So they don't really know what it says. They have to rely on other people who are smarter than them to kind of decipher it, sort of kind of. They can get a couple of words, but towards the end of the book, some of them see they've added stuff or they've crossed stuff out. And some of that stuff is thou shalt not drink alcohol, which was then changed into thou shalt not drink alcohol to excess. And then there were other things that were added and taken away. And ultimately, there's a scene at the end of the book where there's a relationship between the pigs and farmers from other areas. The farmers from other areas are very impressed that animals could run a farm and that they were relatively self-sufficient, didn't need a lot of help from outside, and that the animals are so obedient. Like you said something and they did it, but they didn't know that the animals were scared. They didn't know that they were being lied to and gaslit to believe stuff that they thought had happened, but were told otherwise. That no, it didn't happen. You're going crazy. And so then these animals, fat, in human clothing, at this point in time, they're drinking, sleeping in the humans' beds, dealing with cash money and checks, and just completely reversing what they are. And they're having dinner, they're having a drink with these humans. And one of the things that one of the leaders says is, I think we got so confused and we never actually really hated humans. I don't know whoever said that. That must have been some other people who were here, but we never actually hated humans. We always wanted to be friends, which is another example of gaslighting, because the humans were like, yeah, I thought you had written some stuff. And you, as the reader, you're seeing the entire prior part of the book where it says, don't deal with humans. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And another thing, in terms of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, is right in that same last section of the book. The pigs are now, instead of walking on their 4 legs, they're on 2. They're standing upright, and they're wearing clothes, and they're drinking alcohol, and they're dealing with money and checks, sleeping in human beds. They've completely become the opposite of what they originally set out to become. And the book ends with them giving a toast, and saying we're gonna be partners forever. And I wanna say thank you to you great humans who have helped us animals out so much. And I can't wait to begin our relationship. And as this is being stated, and as these animals are rejoicing and having fun with the humans, you can see the rest of the farm animals looking through windows, seeing all this occur. And then like, oh crap. Because at this point, they're like, this is completely changed. There are some of the people, this is years in the future, so they're very old, but they still remember the beginning. They have brief memories, not from what they've been gaslit to not believe. But there is some who are like, this is completely gone out of touch. These people are not a member of us anymore. And frankly, it's a great ending to the book. And it's tough imagery. And I guess the overview of the book is how something can start off very promising, but then it eventually turns into tyranny and an authoritarian ruler who flat out just becomes worse than it was before. And I highly recommend that you read the book because it is fascinating, to say the least. And I really enjoyed that as well. And then kind of wanted to touch on some other things. Just so I've been here in Pittsburgh for almost a year. My wife and I got here last May. We were engaged at the time. And the whole idea for me coming out of college was to move to a place where I could find a job in radio. And I originally saw a bunch of stations out here in Pittsburgh. I was given some contacts by some people at Penn State. And I reached out to some of those people and started having conversations, asking them questions. But ultimately, there was just applications that I put in. There was never a promise of a job. Not that there should have been, because I'm a college kid and I'm coming straight out of college, and to imagine that I could immediately get a job just because I spoke to these people, I have a relationship with them. I understand that that's a lot to ask. And looking back on it now, I definitely felt like I expected to just leave college and say, I am a Penn State graduate. And so people are just going to want to hire me because it's such a well-renowned school stuff. And I was completely and utterly wrong about that. And so as I came to soon find out, it was much harder than I expected. Because before, for most of my life, I was able to send in an application and then call the people on the phone and say, hey, did you receive my application? I'd really like to be a part of your organization, be really excited to work for you. And then I would most oftentimes get a job. But these were retail jobs or just entry-level jobs. These were never jobs where I was producing a radio show or running the board of a radio show or being on air. And so I made the mistake of having way too much confidence in myself and in my degree. And I think ultimately that hurt me. So when I first moved here, I had a job and I was trying to sell energy plans to people who lived in this area and ask them how much they pay for their electric bill and if they would like to switch. And when I was still in school, I had told my parents and my fiance about this, and they had a lot of apprehension. They had a lot of pause, and I didn't listen to them because in my mind, I trusted these people. They had told me, "Oh, yeah, there is commission, but it's commission on top of salary. So you'll get a base salary, and then every sale that you make is going to be on top of that." And I was like, so I really don't have to, there's not a lot of pressure on me to, oh, I have to get a sale. Otherwise, I'm not going to make any money this week. And so I was like, that's better than the other jobs that I've been hearing from. And I hadn't been hearing anything from radio stations other than just the people I had talked to who worked at these stations. And so I began this job and I very quickly learned that I had pretty much been almost lied to. And I was very upset because I was looking forward and I really loved the people that were at this company. Really loved the people that I work with. They were all super genuine, super nice, but I was disappointed. I felt like a lot of these people, some of them were great at their job. They were great at selling. Unfortunately, I was not. And the reason for that is I didn't really believe in the product and I didn't want to feel like I gotcha or something like that. If I would be like, hey, can I talk to you? And they said no, I'd be like, all right. Because most oftentimes you'd be set up in stores and stuff like that. So these people weren't there to be sold an energy plan or something like that. They were there to shop for their family or to just pick up something. And so right off the bat, I didn't feel comfortable pitching to people, and then having all of these exercises of these people saying, "No, I don't need this," and then having to come back with, "Okay," and then how to flip that, and everything was to make the sale. And I really didn't like that because unless it's something that I truly believe in, that I have knowledge about, that I feel like if somebody does this, that they'll actually see value, then I can sell something. But if it's something that I really don't care about, don't believe in, and I frankly think is the wrong thing for a bunch of people, I have a hard time selling. I also have a hard time of people just saying, no, I know somebody else who had your service and they didn't like it. He got screwed over and there's all this other stuff you have to do. And so eventually, after I learned out about the pay structure and having conversations with other employees who had worked in other fields, and then COVID hit and they lost their jobs, and then they went into the next best thing that they could make money at. And some of these people were very successful beforehand doing jobs that I would have loved to have. And seeing these people, hanging out with them, spending time with them when they were on break, I felt as though I didn't want to be these people. I was going to do what it took to try and find a different way about this. So I ultimately quit that job and I went on to another opportunity, started working at a retail store, and then also working for a local sports team here, just checking tickets and stuff like that. And I liked that for the time. I was always busy. Um, and then one day while I was working, now we're talking July, August, right around that time, right when the wedding was really heating up. And might have been mid to late July. I get a call while I'm at work about somebody who had seen my application that I'd put in and an email that I had sent to a radio station. And they said they needed somebody in the promotions department. And I almost started breaking down crying because it was just like I'd spent so much time trying to find a job in radio, which I originally moved there for. And up until that point, I felt hopeless. Like nobody was, I was emailing radio stations every day, calling, all that kind of stuff, leaving messages. And I just didn't get called back for months. And I felt like I was in some aspects a failure. But I received the call. They asked me if I wanted to interview for a job in their promotions department. I said, of course, absolutely. And so I get married, go on honeymoon after I come back. I formally start working in the promotions department, doing events, calling people on the phones, doing a bunch of office work as well. And was still working. I had to quit my job with the sports team, and I was working the retail store while also at the radio station. And ultimately, it was just way too much because they were on different parts of the city, and I would have to leave one job to be at the other in 30 minutes. And sometimes I would be 15, 20 minutes late just because there was traffic. Or because I had to, like any mini thing that would happen at the station would take me an extra 5-10 minutes. And that was a bunch of time that I was losing. And so eventually I left the retail store and then started working pretty much full time at the radio station. But the thing was, I wasn't working full time hours. I would start working, and on Mondays, it'd be, oh, there's so much work. There's so many tickets that need to be handed out. You have an event on this day, this thing, this thing, and this thing, and this thing, and this thing, and this thing. Bunch of work. But as I would progress and as I would go later on, there was less work. So on Mondays, I would have a bunch. And then by the end of the week, I would finish most of my work in a matter of hours. I didn't have to stay at the station for 6, 7, 8 hours. I had to be there for 3 hours. And that thoroughly impacted my paycheck. And luckily I have a wife, so I'm not the only one who has to pay rent here. Very grateful, very grateful. But it put a lot of strain on me because I'm like, oh no, I could see the writing on the wall. I was like, on one hand, like, are they just gonna let me go because like I finish all the work? Are they gonna keep me in perpetuity and I'm only gonna work 15, 20 hours a week for them and have to find another job? Because when I started, I was working around 30 hours a week. And towards the end, I was working 15. And so on a day of the week where I'm working very few, there were a couple of days where I had finished work and then they were like, all right, on Friday, you don't need to come in. And I was like, okay, just because they didn't have work for me. And brought into my boss's office one day and I'm told, hey, now this is a smaller radio station. He said, hey, the owners, they think we can do everything in the promotions department with only 2 people. And you were the most recent person hired. So unfortunately, you have until the end of the week. I'll write you a letter of recommendation, and I'll do everything I can to help you out. And I was devastated. In the beginning, I was angry, saying, how dare you do this to me? I left my other job. I put all my focus and time and energy into this job and kind of got bit back in the butt. But I mean, looking back on it now, there was definitely some warranted frustration. Maybe in 10, 15, 20 years, I can be more introspective, but there was some reason to be angry. I felt like there wasn't a lot of open and transparency on what had been going on, why I was getting less hours, why there was not a lot of work. And then all of a sudden, hey, you have a couple of days before you're done. And then you're on your own. And trust me, I asked for help, and there's not much they can do. They can't get me a job at another radio station. And ultimately, I left that job and I had nothing. I couldn't go back to my other job at the retail store and think the sporting season was already finished. So I are now looking at about October, November. Start looking for jobs. Every day on the couch, some days more than others. Just searching for jobs, applying. And I come across a bunch of good jobs, and I have a couple of interviews, but they're with companies where it's sales, and it's something that even in the interviews I just get a bad feeling about from these people. And so turned down a good amount of jobs, applying to a bunch of radio jobs, calling, emailing, all that stuff again. And during that time, I felt defeated. I'd come to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for a job in radio. I had my opportunity. I had my chance at a job in radio. I was working the dream. I wasn't getting paid crazy amounts, but I didn't care. I was just happy to be able to say, yeah, I work at this radio station. I was very proud of that. And when I lost that, I felt like I had done something wrong and that I was all to blame and that I wasn't good enough. Luckily, my wife was very, very helpful for me during that moment. Just the constant reassurance of, no, you didn't lose the job because you're bad. You didn't lose it because you did something wrong. It was more of a financial decision. It was more of a thing of, towards the end of it, I really wasn't doing that much work. And so they made a financial decision, something which I don't blame them for. It was in their best interests. I can objectively say that a lot of the work that could have been done could be sustained by two people, and I don't fault them for that. I was just very upset that I was the one who was given the short end of the stick. And so I was bitter for a period of time. And during that time when I was unemployed, I felt as though I felt less than. And my wife was there with me the entire way and just encouraging me, helping me out, find jobs, just a great human being. And I'm eternally grateful to have that. And I think it's extremely important not to surround yourself with people who only encourage you, who don't give any criticism or anything like that. But she was on my butt. She wouldn't let me slip. She wouldn't let me be like, oh, woe is me. Like nothing's ever gonna turn out good for me. Like everybody screws me over, all that kind of stuff. No. She wouldn't let that happen. And I'm very grateful that she didn't let that happen. Much of the time that I spent during the time when I was unemployed was a lot of like, did I move to the wrong city? Did I pick the wrong career path? What's my career going to be? I'm 23 and I don't have much to show for it. But luckily, I was able to find another job, not in radio, but it was a retail job. And started working there, and it was a very easy job. And I still have that job to this date. I'm working part-time. And then recently I was offered a job and accepted a position with a large radio station. And I had applied to them when I was unemployed during that time and kind of put in an application to multiple job openings that they had and didn't really think about it until just one day I was working and I got a call and they said, "Hey, I saw you applied for this job. I would like you to come in for an interview." And I said, "Oh, really? I'd love to." And so I went out, I interviewed, and I felt very good. And there was a lot of bumps along the way, and there was an issue with the job posting itself, in which it had to be taken down and then re-uploaded. And I had already told my friends and my family about, hey, like I feel really confident about this job. Like I felt like I was a really good fit for it. Like I think I would actually be really good in this role. And it was a board operator role. So I'd be running the board for a show. And it would also work out my schedule with my other part-time job. And so I was looking super, super forward to the possibility of being able to work in radio again. And there was, hey, we need to do some things with the job posting. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I think that's normal. And then it'll be 24 hours and then it will be a couple weeks later. And I was disappointed with that, but my wife, my family, my friends, they kind of reassured me and they said, no, you're good. Just stay on the path. And sometimes I would say to myself, I was like, no, I trust them. I think that I think it's just an honest thing. I don't know what it takes to upload and post a job. And so I give them the benefit of the doubt because I don't think that they are gonna screw me over. Although in the back of my head, I thought about my other radio experience and I was like, if this happens again, and I said this to my wife, if this happens again, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know. Like I felt such promise, and if I'm not given the job for this, like I really don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't keep working this other job for the rest of my life. I want to work in radio, and considered moving back closer to my parents, moving to a different state to find other job opportunities. And I felt very inadequate because I was one of the ones who heavily tried to get my wife and I to move to Pittsburgh. And at that point I felt like I had nothing to show for it. Yeah, I worked for a radio station for a little while, but for the most part I just felt as though I kind of let my family down. But the other week when I got the call back and I was offered the job, I almost cried because it was a validation of staying in things, sticking to it, sticking to the plan, not giving up, being persistent, being patient, and having a good source of information of people around you who aren't just yes men, of just saying what you want to hear, but also being critical at times, saying, Zach, you're acting up, man. Like it's not the end of the world just because you're 23 years old. Nobody expects you to be Howard Stern, Joe Rogan at this point in your life. And that was really eye-opening for me and very, very helpful. And so I got the job offer, and I'm going to be starting soon, and I couldn't be more happy. Couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity that has been granted to me. And I'm hoping that I can have some success with this position, and hopefully it turns into something. Because what I've learned through these past couple months, pretty much year, is that you have to be persistent. And the worst thing that's happened to you right now, at some point in your life, if you keep continuing on, is something that you can look back on and have a learning experience from. And you can say, here's where I went right, here's where I went wrong. Was my reaction to this situation appropriate? For example, with the radio station. And at the time I was angry when I got pretty much fired from that radio station. I was angry at them. I held a grudge, which my wife says I tend to do, which is very true. I held a grudge and I was angry and I was upset, and it was their problem. It was their fault. They were in the wrong. And I was just perfect. Like, why wouldn't they want to keep me there? Like, what's their problem? Not taking any accountability or being objective about the situation at all. It was a better business decision for them. I wasn't doing that much work for them. And so from their perspective, it made sense. From my perspective, it didn't make sense because I was out of a job. And I moved myself and my wife to a place hours away from home, and I felt as though I didn't have anything to show for it. So I took my anger route on those people, and I regret that. And I would just say, make sure that you surround yourself with people who can be open and honest with you. People who aren't going to kiss your butt, people who aren't going to say something because it makes you feel better, but they'll be real with you and they'll provide perspective. And you also have to listen to that perspective. Even if they criticize you, find the kernel of truth in there. Find, is there anything about the argument that they're making that makes sense? And this is one of the things that I also like as well. If somebody is making an argument and you're like, what are you even saying? Or you completely disagree with what they're saying. What exactly in their argument do you disagree with? And what's your evidence against it? Like a lot of times in politics, there's arguments in which people say we should have this specific policy. And you say, I don't think we should. Well, why not? What's the reasons why not? And if you can't provide convincing enough arguments or evidence against that position, maybe that person's right. If you can't think of another way to tackle it and you're just saying, no, I don't believe you, or you're wrong because I don't like it, or because it defies my fundamental principles. So maybe you have to shift your principles. And this whole job experience has been a lot of changing in perspectives, shifting my principles, my values, seeing how blessed I truly am to have a family around me that truly cares for me, truly takes care of me, and is open and honest with me, doesn't sugarcoat things. And I think that's very important, to have people that you can sit down and have long conversations with and be honest about what is going on in your life and what you need to talk about. And throughout that period of time when I felt like I was alone, I had a very great wife with me who I had lots of conversations with, and I'm eternally grateful for. And I just say to people out there, find somebody who can call you on your BS. Find somebody who you can laugh with, who you can cry with. Find somebody who you find beautiful on the outside and the inside. Find somebody who you feel like will have you back. Because there were many times when I was not working where my wife could have lashed out on me and taken and said, you're not making any money, so you don't get to have a say in anything, or what are you doing? You're just sitting on the couch all day. You're a lazy piece of crap. There was none of that. There was none of that. And that was very helpful because there was anger. Definitely there was anger. But the way that things were handled, mostly by my wife, was extremely helpful to me. Because if we were getting in fights and stuff and we didn't actually talk about how hard it was for me to be relatively unemployed, that would have put a lot of strain on our relationship. But very grateful that during that time I had a great support system by my wife, and she was with me 100% of the way, encouraging me, saying, "No, you're not a piece of crap. It's just these are the circumstances that you've been dealt, and what's your next step? How do you move forward?" And during that time, I was doing podcasts, and then also I was working out every day, which helped immensely. Gave me an opportunity to reflect and think and be more introspective on myself, and just very grateful for the people that I have around me. And I guess speaking about it, one of the things about me is a lot of times I have thoughts and opinions, and I will bother my wife with these. And so that's one of the reasons why I do a podcast, because I have a lot of things going on in my head. And many times I like to talk about stuff. And other times I just feel like once I come on a podcast, I'm able to just spill everything out. And I'm able to just sit down and just talk and talk. I'm just literally in an empty apartment, just talking to a computer right now. There's no response. There's no real interaction. I'm looking at myself on Zoom right now, talking into a microphone. But it's calming for me because there's very few times in life where you're able to talk and there's no restrictions. I could go on for another hour, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, and there will not be an interruption. There will not be somebody who says, "Well, I agree with you, but here's that." No. And frankly, I like this. This is fun. I like to be able to talk and express my emotions, my feelings, and just get stuff off my chest, man. Which brings me to this. My wife and I have been watching a show called Love is Blind. It's on Netflix. And the idea of the show is that these people are in pods. They're not able to see each other, but they sit down and they talk to each other. And through that, they start their relationship off as looking at the person, not from an outside perspective, but looking at them as who they are throughout conversations that they have. I think it's a very cool idea. And the people that are in it, it makes me mad when I watch it. And here's one of the things. Usually I'll get really into a show if I'm making a lot of comments. If I'm like, "What are you doing? What is this?" Or I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay." Or if I'm like, "Why are they doing that?" And for this show particularly, I don't know how long these people are in pods talking to these people that they don't know what they look like. The only thing that they know about them is just what they talk about. They don't know what these people are like in their day-to-day lives unless they talk about it. They don't have any prior knowledge to these people unless they talk about it. The only way to find stuff out about them is there's no way that they can live with them or anything like that. They just have to talk to these people. And sometimes they ask generalized questions. Other times they get into really deep philosophical conversations. But all of these people at the end of this experiment, I don't know if they're forced, or if they're encouraged, or if there's just an idea, but they all propose to this person that they've never met face to face, they never hung out with. They really don't know anything about them other than what they've talked about, and they've established a good emotional connection. And maybe they've been talking for a month, maybe a month. They don't know what they're like at home. They don't know how they deal with conflict, how they, what their opinions on money, housing, cars, all this type of stuff that is extremely important that you're on the same page when it comes to marriage. If you have somebody who is super not into sharing their money or their time, that can be an issue in a marriage, because a marriage is a connection. You're joined. And so if one person makes a decision, it has to be equal. Both people kind of have to sign off on it. And I think one of the things that the show gets wrong is it's difficult for these people to talk for, maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2, 3, maybe it's a month that they're talking. But all of these people, they propose to this person that they've never met in person, they've never hung out and spent time with. They propose to them. And my thing is, why are you going to make that leap? Why not just, at the end of this, let's start dating, because I like you as a person and I want to get to know you better. And I was saying this to my wife last night, the pressure that there is when you say, let's get married, I want you to be my wife, when you've only known them for a little bit, and you're like, all right, let's get married and then we'll figure out our relationship later. No, 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 no. Marriage is a huge commitment, one of the biggest commitments that you can do in your life. It's probably that or a mortgage. Big commitments. You have to have almost no doubts about your relationship before you get married if you want it to work. There are some people that I would imagine feel rocky about their relationship, and then they get married and then it blossoms into something better. But for the most part, I think it's a good rule of thumb to be not questioning at all. Just be like, this is the person I want to be with for the rest of my life until I die. This is who I want to be with. And there's no doubt about it in my mind. And I think that's a good way to approach marriage. And I feel like these people, they put so much pressure on each other by saying, I want this relationship to work, so let's get married. So that there is that establishment that we're together for the long haul and we're going to work out our differences. I can understand the argument for why that's a good thing. But you haven't known these people. If they've been talking for 6 months, that's a big difference between sitting in front of somebody, not seeing them, and just having deep philosophical conversations, asking questions for a matter of weeks. There's a huge difference. But I still think when it comes to marriage, you have to know that person inside and out, because you're not marrying that person, and that person's not going to stay who they are for that day when they get married for the rest of their life. They're going to change. Their thoughts, their opinions on stuff are going to change. Maybe something happens to their health when they're older. And you need to have built a foundation of trust, of respect and dignity for each other, where you can get in a fight and you can be like, all right, it was just a misunderstanding, a breakdown of communication, and you can move on from it. And I feel like a lot of these people in the show, they're just like, all right, let's just get married and figure it out later, which I completely think is wrong. Absolutely, completely wrong. That's not how you should approach marriage. Screw it. Let's just worry about it later. No, before you get married, it has to be something that is certain. And I'm not saying I'm a relationship expert, but I think as a general rule of thumb, before you get married to somebody, it has to be set in stone. This is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Like there can't be, I mean, there can be a thought of like, maybe in 20, 30 years we'll get divorced or something like that. And I'll do everything in my power so that it doesn't happen. Even that's unhealthy. But there's always in the back of your mind where like, what happens in 30, 40 years from now? I mean, for myself, I don't know, but I know that the person that I'm with is going to ultimately make me a better person because of what I've seen from them for the past 4, 5 years that I've known them to what I'm going to see of them 10 years, 20 years down the line. And I extrapolate all the things, every interaction. It's an aggregation of every interaction, every text, every conversation, every FaceTime call, the long distance traveling, all of that stuff goes into, do I see us together in 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years when we're old and crusty? Would I jump in front of a train for this person? Would I give up my own kidney for this person? I think these are legitimate questions to think about when it comes to marriage, because I think it's one of the most important decisions in your life. And I think that this TV show does a really poor job of having these people that really don't know each other on a deep level. That they don't know what it's like to live with this person. It's pretty much impossible to explain what it's going to be like to live with me unless you live with me. That's the only way you're going to figure it out. I mean, I could tell you, yeah, sometimes I don't clean up after myself, but sometimes I sleep on my side or I'm on my back or I move around when I sleep, but you can't understand the fullness of it every single day interactions with me unless you live with me. And that's a huge part of marriage. And I just think a lot of these people are just going about it the wrong way. And I think that the show is pretty interesting in that aspect, that these people are diving headfirst into marriages that I frankly don't see as something that they should be doing. After the show, start dating. Don't put the pressure on each other that you have to get married. Don't put the pressure on somebody that we have to sign this agreement, that because when you get married, you're not supposed to divorce. And also you're not supposed to say no when they ask if you do. Like that should not be the point where you're making the decision. That should not be the point where you're like, yeah, this ain't gonna work. And to go through the entirety of a wedding, I only know a minuscule amount of what it takes to put on a wedding. And for you to make a decision at the last second and say, you know what, no, I don't want to marry you anymore, at the altar with your family and your significant other's family at the altar as well. And for you to say no in that situation, I don't think it's right. I think if you have doubts in your mind, you should say, okay, can we please just date? Because the pressure of a wedding and getting married is a huge, huge, huge factor for the severity of stress that's put on a relationship. And I think if you start dating, the stakes are much lower. If you break up, you break up. But if you get divorced and you marry somebody after only knowing them a couple of weeks, I just think it's a bad way to move forward. And so that's why I'm not a huge fan of Love is Blind. Well, I'm a fan of it. I like watching it, but I just think the people in it are going about it in a wrong way. I would choose to date somebody as opposed to marry them. Now, maybe they're being told that they have to, or maybe there's some maybe there's some pressure that they feel that they have to propose to these people, that they've been single for their whole lives, and this is the one chance that they have to finally meet somebody and know them from the inside rather than from what they're accustomed to on the outside. And so I feel as though it's a good show. I just think these people are going about their married lives in the wrong way. But can't wait for the next episode to come out. So, folks, let's talk about Ukraine, Russia. All right. I am 23 years old. I am American born, and I don't really know all that much about the whole situation. And so one of the reasons why I talked about earlier, why this episode is coming out late, is because I wanted to learn a lot about kind of the history of the situation and kind of why this is happening, and see kind of the media reaction to the whole situation. I mean, one of the things right off the bat was there were these stories on social media of the Ghost of Kiev, this fighter pilot for Ukraine who's shooting down enemy aircraft. Turns out some of the footage of it was actually from a video game. Then there was audio of not supposed, Ukrainians at a base on an island, and they were being contacted by a Russian boat, said, surrender. And the Ukrainians said, F you. And then the rest of the story goes as they were immediately killed upon and fired upon. And that story was actually not true. Those people were never attacked and killed. They're actually alive. And just story after story of both sides, the Russian and Ukrainian governments, putting out things. There were pictures that were put out of the Ukrainian president that were taken in 2019. There's multiple pictures of where they show side by side the exact same picture that was used in years ago. And it's a really bad situation, what's going on over there in Ukraine. And I don't know all of it, but just being an adult now and being able to see kind of how both governments on both sides are trying to do their best to gain public support for their side and paint the other side as the enemy. And here in America, a lot of what I've seen is no responsibility taken for any of this going on. And I'll be very careful with my words. Oh, got people calling me. What's going on? But the idea that the eastern expansion of NATO, which the United States in the early and mid to late 90s said would not happen. And I think kind of what happened was there are other states that are, or countries, I should say, right along Russia that are members of NATO. And I don't think Putin really had a problem. Once again, I'm not an expert on this, okay? This is just kind of my thoughts about what's happening. He saw that one joins NATO, that one joins NATO, that one joins NATO, that one joins NATO, that one joins NATO. Oh, they're building military bases in that one, military bases in that one. And over time, he was like, all right. So you're getting a little ahead of yourself. You told me you would not extend eastward, and you have. And I feel as though you're right along my border, And one of the big ones is Ukraine. Ukraine is a very large country. If you look at it on a map, it's very large in size, and I didn't realize that. And then in 2014, you have the Ukrainian government overrun, and then you have a pro-Western government that is installed over there. And the talks about NATO start heating up and about them joining NATO. And I think at that point, Russia was like, okay, that's the last straw. Like, yeah, you've taken all these states along the border, but this is just the last straw. And I think what's going to happen is there's fierce resistance by the Ukrainians, and the Russians are going to be like, all right, we're losing troops. There's been stories about thousands of Russians soldiers being killed. I don't know how much that's true. But I can see that happening. I've seen some images of firefights and gunfire that's been happening between both sides. And I think that the war is going to drag out. Russia is getting hit with crazy sanctions, and they're bleeding money out of their butt. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to take drastic measures. Now, is that means that they go nuclear on Ukraine? I think it's a possibility, because you have to look at they're given fierce resistance, and they also want to send a message to everybody, because Russia has the most nuclear weapons on the face of the earth right now. And while they may not be one of the richest countries, most well off, they might not have the best military, they got the most nukes. And that's an issue. So I think they might try and make an example out of Ukraine. They say, you give us any opposition and we will destroy you. Now, I don't know if they drop a nuke on Ukraine, especially if they're trying to move in and trying to take over and make Ukraine part of Russia. But I do think that one of the ways that I think is difficult about this situation is specifically sanctions. Because while sanctions hurt the government, they cut off funding so they can't keep doing operations. I think it also has an impact on the people there. And there was, I believe, a story about people not being able to fly to and from Russia, and people's bank accounts, their Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay, all that kind of stuff being restricted. And you have video games removing Russian people from their game, which I can understand why. I mean, Russia's not very popular right now, but I think the anger should be towards the government of Russia for lashing out and taking this military action. I don't think they should take the military action. I also don't think that the United States should have extended that far eastward in terms of their NATO expansion. Because frankly, I think the US spends enough money on their military budget. The majority of the budget of the United States is the military budget. And part of that is because we're supporting militaries in different states, countries across the world. And I think you could take some of that money and invest it here in the people and protect our people. Like, I'd like to see that student loan debt, wipe it out. Wipe it out. You could take a couple billion and just, let's take a little off the top. Let's cut that interest rate down to 0. But yeah, I think all sides have blame to go around, and I just don't like seeing how videos online of people openly criticizing Russian people, saying that they're complicit in what's going on, and the sanctions is a way of taking it out on, yes, the government first and foremost, because without money they can't do their military operations, but it also affects the people. you crash their economy, you drive down the value of goods and services in a country that already wasn't super wealthy or anything like that. And I think it has a lot of effects on families there. And then just the public sentiment of people within our own government saying members of that country should be assassinated. There should be a no-fly zone put over Ukraine, which means that if there is any ships or any aircraft that are flying above Ukraine that are from Russia, that those would be shot down, which is an act of war. And I think the main thing when it comes to this situation is how do we reduce the chance of a worldwide nuclear war? And I think one of the ways to do that is, yeah, maybe sanctions, because then the war effort won't be able to persist as long because just frankly there isn't enough funding behind it. But I do think that that has a lot of impact on the citizens of that country. And I think that you should do the best you can to hurt those in government and not the people that live in that country that have no say over what kind of military actions that you do. And I think one of the things that I've been watching Dave Smith, and I have also been listening to Scott Horton and kind of his thoughts on the situation over at antiwar.com. And one of their ideas is there should have been a treaty that was signed that said the US government will not move any eastward or have anybody absorbed into NATO along Russia's border. We'll actually remove those countries from NATO and we won't get involved in it. And we'll sign a treaty so that that won't happen. Because I think some of this at least is that Ukraine is joining NATO, or that there were talks of Ukraine joining NATO. And Russia didn't like that because there were some people in Ukraine who were ethnically Russian and said that maybe they wanted to be a part of Russia. And there had been votes and about joining Russia and being Russian from Ukraine. And so I feel like it was something that I don't think the US should have really gotten involved with after we made several statements about NATO not moving eastward towards Russia's border. But still, I'll say again, I don't think Russia should have invaded over this. I think they should have sat down and talked to each other and said, okay, I don't like what you're doing and you don't like what I'm doing, but let's come to an agreement. Because at the end of the day, we live on a planet. And if we were to go to nuclear war with Russia, the United States and Russia, I think it would be devastating for humanity as a whole. And war is rough. War is ugly. It's not a good thing. It's not something that I promote. It's something that I think is very bad. And I think we should do everything in our power to try and reduce the chances of a nuclear war between the United States and Russia to help save the remainder of the world. Because if there's a nuclear war between the United States and Russia, nobody's winning that. That's just going to be complete and total annihilation. And so I would say the number one priority in this conflict is how do we not get into a world war? And I think one of the best ways to do that is to sign a treaty that says, okay, we will make some concessions if you make some concessions. And sanctions, yeah. I would rather see a treaty, a promise that is kept that says, okay, Russia will give you some things and Russia, you'll give us some things. We'll make a compromise over what we can do forward in this situation so that we can prevent a world war from happening. And just a crappy situation all around. I don't have all the answers. I'm not an expert in this in any way. And am just trying to do my best, trying to figure out what's going on. And I don't know everything, but I think one of the ways that we can bring the world together is to see each other as what we are. We are a collection of atoms, collection of molecules, protons, neutrons, electrons. We're made of stardust. And we are currently, to our knowledge, unless the James Webb Space Telescope finds out, we are the only proof of life in the entire galaxy, in the universe. And if we go, it might be another million, billion, trillion years before there's another civilization on this specific planet. And I think keeping homogeny and keeping the status quo of life here on Earth, I think that's the right thing to do. And I don't think anybody should have to die. And I don't think that anybody should have to suffer or be hurt by the current things that are going on in this world, because this is all we got. There's currently no evidence of life on Mars. There's no evidence of life elsewhere in this galaxy, in this universe. We're it, man. And if there is it as advanced as we are? When stars explode, they shoot out elements and a bunch of matter out into the cosmos. And just so happens that our planet was in the right place at the right time, and it had the correct elements to create life here on this earth. Now, maybe there's we're more carbon-based life, and on other planets they might be zinc-based life or silver-based life. There might be other forms of life that the temperatures or the circumstances are just right for them to survive and become an entire civilization like we have here on Earth. And this isn't just something that happened a couple hundred years ago. This is a process that's been happening for billions of years here on Earth, from just something that's circling around the sun. It's barely formed or anything. There's no moon yet or anything like that, to being what we are today. I hope for the fate of humanity that there is no nuclear war, because what we have on this planet is something that, frankly, we don't know if it's anywhere else. I mean, it is my belief that we are not alone in this universe. I think there are other places, probably within our own galaxy, probably hundreds, thousands, millions of light years away, that are, if not as advanced as we are, but maybe even more advanced. Maybe they had a 1,000-year head start, maybe a million, maybe a billion. But I just don't think that it should come down to this. And I don't think that we should give up what we have on this earth for petty things, because this is all we got. And I'll end this by saying, Mr. Vladimir Putin, oh, I wish I was your dad, because then I could have taught you about science, man. Could have taught you about, oh man, you know where we came from? You know how we evolved? You know, the things that make up our very DNA, things that make us up, is from stars exploding. And there's nowhere else in the universe that we have evidence for that there's anything like us, that there's anything that's breathing, anything else that has consciousness like we do. Mr. Putin, Mr. Biden, Mr. Zelensky of Ukraine, I do hope that we will be able to figure out what's going on with this, and hopefully we can make a difference in this world, and hopefully the suffering can stop. not just in Ukraine, but in places like Yemen, Syria, all over the world, in which the United States has big roles to play in causing human suffering. And I hope that the USA as a country and all countries across the world can be more unified. I'm not talking about globalization, I'm talking about unified in how we view each other as humans, not as skin color or gender or sex or anything, but as humans. We're all made up of the same stuff. It's just a different codes in our DNA, a little bit of differences here and there. Yeah, I have blonde hair. Yeah, I have kind of blue eyes, but that doesn't make me fundamentally different from my wife, my parents. We're all the same thing, and we're all in this thing together. And you only have one life, and you have to live it to the maximum limit. You got to keep it at 10,000 RPMs every day, because not every day is granted to you. This world is 3.6 billion years old, approximately that old. Universe is even more billions. And I would hate to see that this planet would end in something that was caused by humans. Something where humans had the choice of, I press this button and it starts something that's going to end the world, as opposed to a giant asteroid coming to hit, or a giant volcano, or some other natural disaster to happen where we can't really control it. I'd hate to see it end like that. So once again, thank you very much for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, whatever, on YouTube, on Spotify, on whatever, however, wherever you are listening. Thank you so much for listening, and appreciate it, comrades. Enjoy the rest of your night. Peace.